Hello.
There's my girl. Oh my God, all the way from the West Coast.
Yep.
Let me tell you something. You haven't changed, not even a little bit. Like
Oh man.
you look exactly how I remember. Exactly.
Yeah. I don't think I've aged or changed since I was like 3.
No, but that's a good thing. Like,
Yeah.
embrace that.
Hopefully it pays off.
Yeah.
I do have one gray hair now. It's my unicorn hair. I covet it.
Well, I got a bunch of those. Like there's a whole.
Yeah, I know you're rocking it.
They just pop in, pop out, and I'm like, okay. I used to dye it, and I was like,
Yeah.
I got to 45. I was like, we're done. I'm not doing that anymore.
Well, it looks great.
I go. Okay, let's get this party started. So, hello everybody, and welcome to Change for the Better: The Power of Arts in Education, episode 17.
I'm Stacy Tiro, a high school performing arts teacher for over 25 years. I've taught a lot of amazing people. Now that so many of my students are adults, they'll teach me how, through the lessons in my classroom, they have been changed for the better.
So today we're going back just a couple of years. Sometimes students cross your path for just a short time. But when they do, they make a really big impact when they're there. And I was fortunate to meet this beautiful woman in front of me in 2011 when she was a freshman. And I noticed pretty quickly that she had a lot to offer, particularly to our dance and our thespian programs. Most notable was her fall performance as Sylvia Barrett, the newbie teacher who's struggling to find her way in a challenging high school classroom in up the down staircase. And she did it as a sophomore. And it was actually quite a memorable performance. Sadly, she left Spring Valley in 2013, but she moved halfway across the country to Illinois, and she graced another school with her presence, and she graduated on time and all that. After high school, she moved further west. She just kept going towards the ocean to California, and she studied product design engineering at Stanford University. The kid was pretty smart. Yeah. And I remember seeing through social media, all sorts of her fun accomplishments. She joined a swing dance troupe in college, and she did all these performances and flipping upside down, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then she had a little foray into jewelry design. She liked doing metal work. And I am now quite thrilled to reconnect and catch up after all of these years. And it's been quite a few years.
It has, and quite a few hobbies and interests and jobs along the way.
Well, I'm hoping that you're going to talk all about that. So we're going to get right into question number 1, which is, what is your name, the year that you graduated, and just tell me some more about what you do now.
So my name is, most people in high school knew me as Sofia Carrillo, but I kind of go by Sofia Poe now, if you're looking for me out there. But yeah, I graduated high school in 2015 and college in 2019. And my job right now is that I am a cook at a historic hotel on Orcas Island, off the northern coast of Washington in the Puget Sound. So I work in the cafe as a line cook and a prep cook. And then I also, it's kind of a learning kitchen. So I'm learning how to be a chef and run a small business at the same time. So I get to kind of dabble my hands in a little bit of everything in the restaurant world.
I happened to look up Orca Island because it was a completely new thing to me. And I saw that apparently Oprah Winfrey had a property there, quite a large property there for a while. I think she sold it and she's not there anymore. But I was like, oh.
Yeah, this kind of put Orcas on the map. It was a little unknown until Oprah bought her house, which she never really lived in, and then sold it a couple years, I think last year. But she should have stayed. It's beautiful out here.
What drew you to that area?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a roundabout story, but I'll go into it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I graduated college and just needed time to kind of grapple with exactly what happened during those 4 years. And I think a lot of people experience that kind of post-graduation, what is my life? Where am I heading? What does any of this mean? So that definitely happened to me. I thought I would go to Puerto Rico and spend a month finding myself, and I would like be ready to move to New York and start my life as like this, high-end, amazing jewelry designer. And instead I spent a month in my bed thinking about my life and not really coming to any conclusions about it. Exactly. So I called my parents up and I said, I'm coming home, pick me up at the airport. And when I got home, my mom had a little book on the nightstand that said, Your Quarter Life Crisis, managing your early 20s. And so, yeah, I just spent most of the pandemic kind of figuring out myself. And it was a little bit nice at the beginning that the whole world kind of joined me.
Right.
And I had time to actually breathe
Right.
and not worry about things happening around me. And during that time, I just fell in love with cooking. That was the one thing I could do during the day, and all the restaurants were closed and I love eating. So I would just spend 8 hours a day cooking whatever I could. I would menu plan, and it was like a hobby. It was an exercise. It was creativity, all in kind of one.
Right.
And I got to eat at the end. Kneading bread, you can get all your anger out, and making curry all day. I just loved the whole energy around cooking. So yeah, I got a job at a brewery just to make some money, and I'd always been interested in working at a brewery or a bar or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small business too. So in the back of my head, I was always thinking like, I want to work for small businesses and like still cater to that entrepreneurial side of myself.
Okay.
And then that closed. And so I moved to my aunt and uncle's farm in upstate New York.
Oh.
And that's a place that I've always gone back to in a time of crisis. They've kind of been stable in my life for that. And so I called them up, I went to the farm, and I was there for most of the winter of the main pandemic,
Right.
2 years ago now. So yeah, it was just like all the fresh vegetables. I could do my job up until noon and then just spend the rest of the afternoon cooking for everybody on the farm. And finally felt like I was in a place where I was ready to like get that next big job and like make the full move away from family and be really on my own. And so I started looking at engineering jobs because that's what I studied in school. Right. And every job I came across, I would read all the descriptions of, using Excel and the Adobe suite and, designing all these products, and do you know CAD, and can you sit in office for this amount of time? And none of it appealed to me. Right. And felt right. Like something was always off. And I thought if I just did it, if I just forced myself, like that's what people do, you just go get the big job in the big city, but it wasn't clicking. And so roundabout found this website called The Good Food Jobs. And it had all kinds of wacky jobs, from like food startups to restaurants to working on farms in interesting places. And on the second page was one that said, come work on an island and learn how to be a chef and an innkeeper. And I was like, that sounds cool.
I could do that.
Let's do that. Wow. And there was actually a property for sale down the street from the farm that was an inn, a restaurant, and a cooking school. And it was for sale. And I was like, oh, it'd be such a dream to buy that. But I didn't have the money. And I knew I didn't have the skills. And so I said, well, how can I get the skills to eventually, if I see a property like this, I can just buy it and I can do that. Right. And so this job seemed like a perfect learning opportunity. So I applied, and then a couple months later found out I got it, and just, did my last farmer's market, packed up my things, went home, bought a car, flew to the West Coast, bought a car, drove the car onto the ferry, and like my life started. And here I am a year and a half later, or amazing. Almost a half, but yeah.
I've been following you on your Instagram, which I'm going to post. That's at ILYPO. I want to say that's I love you, Poe. Like, I don't know where Poe came from. Where did Poe come from?
A great story, actually. Yeah, it's a family nickname.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure how it originated, but yeah, my immediate family, they all call me Poe, which is P-O. Yeah. And then when I was making social media, I was scared of internet predators.
Sure.
So I stuck an E on the end and made it my last name. And now everybody just knows me by that. So I just kind of rolled with it, and it's become my name now.
Your little thing. I love it. I was confused at first. I was like, there's got to be a story behind that. There always is.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a sense of where you are now, and a little bit how you got there from college forward, but let's go back a little bit further to our high school self. And I want you to use your adult brain and describe your high school self.
She was very creative. I think she took every opportunity she could to kind of like figure out, how can I make this interesting? That was always my goal. Like if I got any assignment, if I was involved in any activity, it was always, how can I make this more interesting? And I loved that kind of energy that I had back then. I think that was just sort of like my main motivator. I was definitely weird. I would make earrings out of all kinds of materials that I found lying around the house and trash cans and various places. And I loved matching them to my shirts. So I kind of had a little Miss Frizzle thing going on. So I wasn't afraid to kind of put myself out there and be a little bit different. I really embraced that, which I loved about myself. And she was also kind of lost. I always felt like I was missing my people or missing my home or there's always something missing and I could never quite put my finger on it. Yeah, and I struggled a lot with that kind of privately more. And even though I was, excelling at school and had friends and all of that, what I realize now as an adult, there was something wrong and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And I think it took me until I became kind of an independent person and did all this work in the last year to kind of figure that out.
You were very different, and in the best way. You were kind of like the kid who like stood out to me as a teacher. You stood out and I was like, this girl, there's something about this girl. Okay, like we're gonna try and tap into this, because I saw how creative you were and how kind of out of the box thinker that you were. When you're in a high school, most adolescents do not think out of the box. They're either incapable or they don't have like the interest in doing that because they're just kind of like in their own heads. And you, as much as you may have been in your head, you were always like kind of sort of thinking out there. And it was refreshing. Yeah. It was lovely. And I think that, when you did that show in your sophomore year, I think that you were able to bring that part of yourself to the part, because that was a tough role. I mean, you're talking about like a new teacher who's like sort of being, attacked from all sides, or all of her sensibilities are attacked. And that like, that's hard to get into that headspace as a 15-year-old, but you were like really convincing about the whole thing. I was like, oh, okay, I feel really good about this. Okay, we're moving on.
Funny enough, though, until I was writing, like you had asked me what shows I was in, I'd completely forgotten I was in that. And maybe because it was like, I remember putting in a lot of work for it and just all the line memorization and the hours, and maybe part of me just kind of like erased it. But I remember like being in The Wiz and Footloose and the Katrina play. I remember those like a lot more.
The fun.
It's probably the fun. Yeah. I had more time to kind of have fun with it.
It's funny that you say that, because, the kids who get the biggest parts, it's such a huge responsibility, of course. And they are spending so much time like doing the work that they don't often have the freedom and the time to like kind of have the fun. I mean, it's fun and it's very validating to like have that responsibility, bestowed upon you, but you don't really have the time to sit with your buddies and like mess around while like the leads are like working on their stuff. And so that must have been, I could see that must have been kind of challenging.
I'm doing theater now in the last year. And so I've done 2 shows since January. I was in more minor roles in those, and it was so much fun. And I was just thinking about that actually is one of my favorite parts of the last show that I was in, was just sitting backstage and watching my friends run the show and just like really get into these roles and just nail it. And that brought me so much joy. Part of me, of course, is just like, oh, I wish I was the lead. I wish I was having my big moment. And people were like staring at me. I was the one getting in the way. Yeah. The ego was definitely there, but it was just so joyful to watch friends of mine just out there, and I could be in the wings, and it felt very theater.
Were these community productions?
Yeah. So we actually have a big, small island, but we have a performing arts center that's pretty well funded, and they do a lot of shows. And so, I was in a production of Pride and Prejudice in the winter, and then a new play this spring called Still Now by Katie Bender.
I love that you're doing theater. Did you do theater in college?
I did one show, but it was like a fun student-run musical that we do as like a school tradition. Yeah, theater kind of fell out of my life after high school. And there was a brief moment when I was applying to colleges that I thought I would apply for drama. Because I did so much of it and loved it in high school, and that ended up not happening. I think I got somewhere along the lines, I thought I had to be practical about my degree. I think how I ended up in engineering. But and then just didn't do anything for years. And I was walking down the street last fall and it said auditions, Pride and Prejudice. And I was like, I haven't auditioned for anything in forever. Like something about it was like, just do it. Like, you'll meet members of the community. Like it'll be a good chance to get to know people on the island. Why not? Like you like theater. And so I went, and now I'm enmeshed. I'm entrenched. Thank you. Yeah. No, I just had callbacks for another show yesterday that I'm trying to decide if I should do or not.
Don't just no deciding. Just do it.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Go
That's
and
what I
do it.
needed.
If you got the time, you can fit in your, in your work life and everything.
And it's just funny, those things that do crop up again after being hidden for so long. Like, part of me has always throughout my life held on to that, like, what happened to the acting? What happened to the acting? Like, weren't you gonna do that? When I'm walking down the street every once in a while, I'm like, what if a casting director walks by? Like, I happen to be doing something cool, And so it's just fun that it is back in my life now, and it's given me a new sense of ease in that all these other interests that I have, even if they've fallen into the background, they might come into the foreground later in my life. And that was a big thing with jewelry, is I thought I was going to do that after college, and I was so into it at the time and was telling everybody that that's what I was going to do, and it didn't happen. And now I've learned that it's okay. It might come back later in a way that you're not expecting, and that's just been so helpful, because especially during that year plus where I was grappling with things, I was, beating myself up for not doing what I told everybody I was going to be doing and what I thought I was.
Right.
And so, that was a good lesson to learn.
It's like you set expectations for yourself and then made it public. And then it's like, wait, let me get it back up here.
Or like, oh, it was so funny. I stopped wearing jewelry too, because I would only wear jewelry that I'd made, so that it would be like a talking point, people like, oh, I like your earrings. Oh, well, I made them, and then I could talk about my stuff. Yeah. I just like refused to wear anything that I hadn't made. And then I stopped making things. So I stopped wearing jewelry. And just recently, like a week ago, I bought a pair of earrings and I wore them. And I was like, oh, I think I'm like moving past this. And then somebody on the airplane was like, I like earrings. And I was like, I didn't make them.
And they were like, never have.
And then it didn't matter.
Fantastic. Turning your attention back into high school, back into the Spring Valley studio and stage. Yeah. What was something, if you can remember, that happened there, or things that happened there that helped you to manage or to regulate your adolescent self?
I think it was just having like a break during the day. Having like going to class, doing academics, kind of being in that grind, and then just completely switching your mindset to just like, we're here to be in our bodies and to get in touch with ourselves and to just take a moment to breathe. I know back in the day, like meditation and mindful practices weren't as talked about. And it wasn't until I got to college, and nowadays, especially during the pandemic, people are talking about it so much, about taking, mental health breaks and, taking time to breathe, and the whole mindfulness practice. And without all of that language and knowledge that we have now, we were still doing that in your classroom, and we were getting that chance to breathe. And I still remember, and I think of it almost every time I'm stretching, particularly in like a dance class sort of setting. When I'm lying on the ground and you're like, this is a California stretch. When you're just lying there, having a second to rest. And so when I'm done stretching, sometimes I'll be like, okay, now it's time for a California stretch. My brain was racing in high school. And just having that moment, I think, made a lot of it, like a big difference. And it's a lesson that I kind of still carry with me. It's just,
I was actually gonna ask you, because that's like actually the next question, which is, what are some of the lessons that you still hold on to today, you use today?
Another one, I think, is like losing ego a little bit. I have another example. We were painting the set for Footloose, and I had this idea that we were painting these big basketball nets. I don't know if you remember this at all, but I had like, it was a conversation where I was like, no, it's got to be like basketball net colors. Like, it's got to be white net. It's got to have like a glass kind of like blue background, and it's got to have the orange thing around. Like, and I think you were there that day and had decided that it was going to be like purple, teal, and pink. And I was like, this makes no sense. Like, and I was like trying to argue with whoever was doing the painting. And like, you came up, and I was like, this is like, I couldn't handle it. And I was like, we're ruining the entire show. The whole show is going to be a mess. Like, this is an absolute disaster. And then I couldn't do anything about it because I wasn't in charge of painting or the set. And so it got painted pink, teal, turquoise, purple, all these crazy random colors. And then I went to the back of the auditorium and I looked at it and I was like, it looks great. It looks perfect. It fits in with the show. Like it's supposed to be this way. And it was just a moment of like, I don't know everything. And you just have to trust that other people that you're collaborating with and working with, like, and who are in charge of whatever part of this creative process, like know their job. And it's not all about what you think is right. Like their ideas are also just as valid and maybe even better than what you thought. That was a big lesson.
I kind of live that as much as I can, because just as experienced as I am in all the ways of high school theater that I am, sometimes the kids have way better ideas than I do. And so there's like that collaborative process I have come to not just value, but kind of rely upon, because, you know, the kids like you who have those kind of out of the box ideas, it gives me like chance to think, oh, this is something I never would have thought of, but you know what? It sounds like it's kind of a good idea. And to be perfectly honest, I have no idea who had the idea of teal and pink and purple. That was probably Matt. If I had to guess, that's probably Matt. And usually when he says something like that with color, I'm like, you do you. Because 9 times out of 10, really more like 10 times, I look at it, I'm like, yeah, just the same thing they use it. Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be.
It works. Yeah, there it is.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and another one was that I just remembered I'm thinking of, is the experience of, for the most part, I excelled in academics, and coming into the studio and not excelling as much as my peers that, like, you know, I would do better at the academic side, and then, you know, walking into the dance space and just like seeing my friends dance way better than I could or sing better than I could. And it was a very humbling experience to recognize that we all have our own talents and our own skills, and they're all to be celebrated. And so I think that was important for me. Yeah, it was so fun to be like, oh, whoa, you're like, yeah, this is you at your best, you know, like, okay, I see you now. That was really fun. Yeah.
I love that. How have you changed since you graduated from high school?
I think the biggest has just been gaining independence. Honestly, I think I see sort of high school and college as a bit of a continuation of who I was. There were definitely some changes in college. I had a lot more freedom and to, you know, do all kinds of things. And I think people that I went to high school with in Valley and even in Illinois would have recognized me in college. They would have just seen me become like a little bit more of myself. But a big turning point was after college. And yeah, something that I struggled with was I'm not formally diagnosed, but I realized later on in college that I probably have ADHD. And a lot of the things that I struggled with in high school and college became like, oh, whoa, that's why. That makes a lot of sense now. So a lot of that year figuring myself out was like, what is learned behavior? What is like my brain just functions differently and I haven't been treating it as it should be treated, and how much of it can I change and how much of it do I need help changing? That was a big part of what I was sorting through. And so, yeah, in high school, I struggled a lot, but I always managed to skate by at a level that I didn't think I had to address any of my issues I was dealing with. And so I just kind of like suppressed them all because I was like, I'm doing great. Like, I'm getting the lead in this play. I'm getting A+ on my report cards. Like, I have friends, like everything's fine. Like all this stuff that I struggle with, I can just push that away. I can push it away. I can push it away. And in college, I couldn't push it away anymore. And it kind of exploded in my face. And that's why I had to do a lot of healing afterwards. So yeah, the biggest change now is just, I understand myself more. I know if I'm having a bad day, if I'm struggling with something, I know why I'm doing that and why it's happening. And I also now have tools to deal with it. The big thing is like writing papers. Like in high school, I would wait until the last day or the last hour, and I could crank it out in an hour. Or, you know, 24 hours or whatever. I'd stay up all night. I'd just crank it out. I'd do everything last minute and I could get it done. And in college, I tried to do that same thing and it didn't work because the papers were bigger and longer and harder. You know, I failed a class because I couldn't write a 3-page paper. And yeah,
wow.
me.
Right.
So,
but you know, that whole know thyself, that is so important. So,
and then I learned that it's not because I'm not smart. It's not because I don't know how to write a paper. It's because I struggle with deadlines. I struggle with time management. I also didn't know in high school and college, like how to ask for help. I thought because I'm so good at everything, like I'm good at mental health stuff too. I know how to ask for help. Like who doesn't know how to ask for help? But I really didn't. Yeah, it wasn't until like my last year of college and afterwards that I learned how to ask for help and how to kind of address what was going on. Now I like know what environments work for me, things that are fast paced, things that are like, exciting and changing. I know who I want to surround myself with. And
What would your adult self, you today, tell your high school self to help ease the way?
I would tell her that regrets are just part of maturity. When I started maturing and healing and all that stuff, I regretted a lot of things. And to just like move past that, like it's okay to move forward. Like it's painful to regret. That's just a sign that you're going forward. Like, so just lean into it. Don't be scared to move forward because you're worried it's going to hurt. Another thing, there was this lesson I learned. It was this kind of technique that a friend brought up that I'd love to go tell my high school self about because I do it now, which is if you're ever in a place where you're feeling down or you just need, you're kind of lost, just ask for a hug from your future self. Just be like, okay, future Sofia, like I need a hug right now. I need you to tell me that things are all right, that your life is going good. Like, please like come and hug me. And then just accept that, like accept a hug from your future self and sit there with that. And then later on, when you have healed, when you are feeling good and you're reflecting on your life, like think back to those moments that stuck out when you were asking for a hug and go back and hug yourself. When I was actually like thinking about this for this interview, I was like, oh, I haven't done that in a while actually. And so I kind of went through my Rolodex of memories and was like, okay, I've been doing this for like maybe 2.5, 3 years now. Like what was one of those moments where like I needed a hug, even if I hadn't asked for it? And so I picked one of them and I like went back and like, just sat there and kind of like went back in time and like gave my old self a little hug. So I would tell her to like reach out. If you can't reach out to anybody around you, like reach out to yourself. Like I'm here for you.
Wow. And do you actually like physically?
Yeah, I just kind of like sit there and I'm like, I got you. Like, or you just kind of like sit and feel it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was actually a super helpful kind of technique. You eventually will be in a better place where you can go back and give those hugs. So don't be afraid to ask for them.
First of all, there's so many like recurring themes that happen in this podcast. A lot of things like kind of come. That's the first time anybody has come up with that kind of idea. And I love that. And I can't wait to put that in the blog because that's amazing. I should try doing that myself once in a while.
Yeah, it's a good practice.
Talk about like self-soothing. That's like the ultimate of self-soothing. So you did talk about a lot of things that you had been grappling with, end of college, post-college, getting into like your okay self now. But what's something that you're still grappling with?
Oh my gosh, wanting to do it all. Wanting to do all the clubs, all the activities, work the job, have the social life, go out. Even in high school, I was like that. I didn't just do thespians. I was also in debate and forensics. I was in Science Olympiad. I did Key Club. I did gymnastics outside of school. I did circus school. I did I did a lot. If you look at my life now, I work full time as a cook. We actually have a dance program on the island, so I'm taking burlesque classes, and we have a show for Pride this weekend, so I've got a rehearsal tomorrow for that. I've been making my costume for it. I'm doing theater, so I've been in 2 shows already. We have an open mic night every Tuesday at the local pubs. A friend of mine and I have been writing poetry with each other. So I do that. There's karaoke on Fridays, volunteer opportunities. I go swimming as often as I can.
You are who you are.
I ran a half marathon. So I was training for a marathon and then had to do the half because I twisted an ankle.
I saw that. I saw that on your Instagram.
I'm still trying to cram it all in, and that's what I struggle with most on a day-to-day basis. Is just like, how can I fit it? And I want to do it all. Like I'm passionate about everything, and so that's a big one. Yeah,
join the club. That it's not just there's so much time. And you're still young, so you still have a lot of energy. But at some point, sometimes the energy starts to wane. You're like, okay, I need both physical time and like energy time, because the energy doesn't always stick and sometimes you need to pull back and you need to rest, but you're still like in your
Yeah.
kind of early to mid 20s, so you're good for a little while.
I still feel it though. Like I was pulling all-nighters a lot in high school, and then in college it became chronic to the point where I was practically nocturnal, or I'd get like 1 or 2 hours like sprinkled throughout the day. That was a big one. I woke up one morning like my junior year and was just like, I cannot do this anymore. And it stopped. But it was, yeah, I had really, really, really poor sleep hygiene throughout high school and college. I think a lot of people, I talked about it. People kind of brag about it in high school. I was like, oh, I got like 2 hours of sleep tonight. I didn't realize that it was like significantly worse than everybody else, because I thought it was just like a fun personality thing. And I would play it off as a joke. I wouldn't talk to people in the right way about it to have anybody be like, oh, you should maybe.
That's not okay.
That's not normal.
Yeah, that's not good.
And in college, I started to realize that when my peers were like, yeah, I also like pulled an all-nighter. I'm like, okay, me too. And then it was like, and I did it the next day and the next day. And they're like, whoa, that only happens once a month, you know, when you have an important assignment. I definitely have tools now that I can be like, oh, okay, I'm doing the thing where, you know, I got to prioritize. And I've learned that like, okay, I got to prioritize sleep because, you know, I haven't done that in the past. And I know that's important. I've definitely gotten better at it, but running from work to audition to like rehearsal. And in the past, I'd be just like, oh yeah, I can go, you know, I can do this.
Right.
Yeah, no problem, whatever. Like, oh, I'll just like, you know, drink a yerba mate and get some caffeine in my system. And I'm like, nope, no caffeine. If I'm tired, I'm tired. I'm going to take a nap.
And you need to sleep.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you miss about your high school self? And then what's one thing that's like gotten better since you adulted yourself?
I miss my interest in academics.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was so into, you know, the science stuff, and I wanted to be a marine biologist at some point. And yeah, I just was passionate about school and learning. And I mean, I still am. The academic kind of structure and side of things has fallen by the wayside, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did really like that about myself at the time. And so I kind of miss that.
Well, and you get the variety of academics, you know, you kind of like, you get a little of this, you get a little of this. And it's just, it kind of keeps changing throughout the day.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel living here kind of feels like I'm back in school because, you know, I'm learning at my job. It's not just a job. And yeah, I get to go to like a dance class. I get to go do some theater. And there's a lot of really amazing artists and professionals on this island. So like the last show that I was in, which with she's an actress from New York and, you know, has directed and produced shows and short films. And we were working with a playwright who's, you know, a legitimate playwright. There was dancing in the show as well. And so we were working with a Buto dancer, this Japanese style of dance from Seattle, who's like a professional who came up to teach us about her art form. I was like getting all these master classes and something I do in my free time. So yeah, I still kind of am in that environment. It's just a little different.
It's more targeted to things that you're choosing.
Yeah. And it's also in a way too that honestly works better for me. Like I don't have any assignments. I don't have to write any papers. No all-nighters. That is for the better. But I do miss that I was like good at school. That was kind of fun. Doing like the earring thing, like how I used to wear all the crazy earrings and stuff. But I've started doing a similar thing now where I've always been into makeup and I would kind of like do it privately in my bedroom.
Sure.
And just like do all this crazy stuff and then in the morning erase it and go to school and be like, I hate makeup. And recently I've like realized that like, oh, I'm an adult with a job. Like I can buy the fun, sparkly, multicolored makeup that I want and get the eyeliners. And I've just been doing like all this crazy stuff and just like going out. And as soon as I get home from work, like I just like paint my face and then I go and get my groceries. And
you just posted something actually with all the eye makeup.
Yeah, and now I'm like, the next step is like, oh, I'm gonna like put my face on the internet with this, like see how that goes. But yeah, so like all my friends now here are like, what's the new look for the day? Just like back in high school, people would be like, what's the new earring for the day? And that's kind of a motivation to keep up a creative practice, which it is. That's been kind of missing from my life since high school, is like a daily creative drive. And I've just recently found that again.
What's one thing that's gotten better?
I think just, yeah, emotional attunement. Like if I'm having a bad day, if I'm sad, if I'm like angry, if I'm stressed out, I can now figure out why. Back in high school, it was just like, just keep going.
Right.
Guess I'm a teenager. I don't know. Now I can I can sit with myself and figure it out. And that's a tool I didn't have before. So it's definitely gotten better. And just more confident too. Like I had this like weird thing where I am a pretty confident person, and in a room I tend not to have trouble, but I think at home I would sometimes be like, oh, like why am I not that part of like the bigger friend group, or like why am I not getting invited to this or that? And like that used to be a big thing. I had a lot of FOMO for like I would see people, on social media out and about at people's houses. And for the most part, like I never had anybody come over to my house, and I never like got invited to a lot of things. That was like a whole thing in high school, which sounds so bad nowadays. And I think a lot of it was also just moving around. Like everybody always had their set friend groups, and I was always the floater. And it kind of continued in college too. And now I'm just like, I'm having a little dinner party later. So I'm like, I've gotten used to just being like, yeah, like, come on over, this is me. Or just I invite myself to things. If I even hear mention of something, I'm like, oh, I'm going. That was kind of how I got to know people on the island, is I was be like, there's like a bonfire happening here. And I was like, okay. And I just show up and they're like, who do you know? I'm like, nobody.
Just here.
And people were like, okay, come on in. So that's definitely something that's gotten better.
The best people, the nicest people are very accepting of new people. Just, oh, you're interesting. Come on, let's go. If you could give a piece of sage advice, and it could be more than one piece, to high school students now, what would it be?
Forgive yourself for not knowing what you want in this moment. It's okay to not know exactly what you want, or think you want something and then you get there and you're like, oh, this isn't it. Honor whatever you can do in the present moment and just keep doing that. And eventually like everything will kind of follow. Like I felt very lost, and I let that kind of get to me, rather than just being like, I'll figure out exactly what it is I want, and I'll just like all these little other things that are flitting around that I'm ignoring for the sake of like finding some like passionate, like higher goal. Like I can just honor those things, and eventually they'll kind of coalesce into something. Not trying to like have it all figured out, and just kind of do those things that interest you, that maybe aren't as like exciting or single-minded, and eventually your life will kind of like figure it out. Like take all the little side paths, and they're all looping around some sort of straight and narrow, and you're eventually going to get there.
Yeah.
Like forgive yourself for stepping off of the path and onto a little trail.
The pressure that these kids put on themselves, and look, social media has a lot to do with it, and college prep has a lot to do with it, and figure out what you want to do. And half the time I tell kids, like, college is not about majoring in the thing that you're definitely going to do for the rest of your life. College is about, it's like the extension of high school, like you said, and figuring out yourself as a little bit more of an independent soul, and studying and being disciplined. And do you have the personal discipline to like live in your own space and not have your parents on top of you, and go have a social life but not overdo it, and work towards something and choose the things that you want to do without the outside influences right on top of you. Kids who are like, oh, I'm going to college. I'm like, go to college, do it. Chances are you're not going to do the thing for your life that you majored in, as evidenced by Sofia Poe. There you go. But the things that you learn in that course of study are really more about yourself than about like the classes that you took. To me, that's the most important thing.
I feel like that's just at the forefront of my mind right now. I recently went back to Stanford for graduation last weekend, and the speaker, she majored in literature, I believe, and became an astrophysicist. She studied English and then spent 2 years, working all these odd jobs and waitressing here and there and traveling, and then was watching a TV show about like neutron stars and was like, that's it. And then became an astrophysicist and like did all of that and became a scientist. So that's just been on my mind, and kind of thinking about my own life trajectory, that feeling that I had in high school of like something is missing, something feels wrong. Like I'm doing the thing, I'm going to high school, I'm doing my classes, like I'm writing the papers, I'm sitting and like studying for the tests. Something just always didn't feel right for me. And I think that was the part of myself that was just like, go out there in the world and like do all the like, the things that you want to do. Like you learn better when you're outside. You love working with your hand. Those things, those lessons. Like in the summers, I would always go work on the farm. Even in college, like all my friends were working in big cities, getting paid a lot of money, working at tech firms and consulting and financing and engineering and doing the internship thing. And I was like, I want to go to the farm. And I would kind of beat myself up for that.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you like those things. Like those are opportunities to learn and to grow and to be creative. And they're just as noble pursuits as getting an internship and doing all the things you're supposed to be doing. So yeah, I've learned to just like, lean into that, and it's totally fine.
Someone needs to
But-
grow the food.
And it's so yummy. It's so good. Go work on a farm.
Yeah. On Sophia's Instagram page, she puts like all these pictures of the food that she makes, and so beautifully plated, but it's like this like rustic looking food. I'm like, I need to go to Washington State now and go to this restaurant hotel and eat her food. And then she does these videos of like the process of her making the food, and it's just like these like little short, videos, and then she eats it, and I'm like, I want to be eating that food now too. So you're onto something. You're definitely onto something.
Yeah. Making those videos was fun. The first couple I did were so terrible. I went back and watched them the other day. That's something that's changed too about myself, is I've learned to fail a lot more than I have in high school. And it's funny because my major, even at Stanford, like one of the big like ethos of it is fail early and fail often. That's what they drill into you as like a product designer, like you got to fail. You got to make bad prototypes in order to get to the good one. I just couldn't do it. And it wasn't until I really started like cooking that I was like, oh man, this like doesn't taste good, or this is like burned, or this didn't come out right. And I was like, that's okay. I'll just like, it's still edible. I'll still eat it. I'll still I'll try again the next time. Right. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing that I could never do when it came to other things in my life. But with this, I'm able to kind of like, I'm still so invested in it that I'm able to learn this lesson finally. Or like, the first cooking videos I made were bad, but I was like, I want to be good at cooking videos. Like I want to show people what I'm doing. So I just kept going, and then they got better. Yeah, this whole new path that I'm on has just given me a lot of lessons, just even outside of knowing how to make dishes and yummy food.
It's all about the process.
Yeah.
It's all about the process. This whole podcast thing, and what am I going to do with the rest of my life when I decide to retire? Because I'm not going to get old. It's just not going to happen. So what am I going to do?
And your whole like gymnastic journey, that's been so inspiring too. See you go through that. Ooh. Every time I'm like, yes, Miss Tiro.
You need to find a gym, by the way, my friend.
Me?
Yes. You.
Oh, wake up gymnastics. I know. Well, actually, that's another thing that's kind of like fallen out of my life, but I've been dancing now. That like came back. There's lots of different classes here, but yeah, I know. There's no gymnastics gym on the island, but there's an aerial art school though. So I could take silk classes and Lyra. I was going to add that to my list of activities, and I had to say, Sophia, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
You can say no to some things, like do the dance classes because you already said you were going to, and then maybe next year you'll do the circus ones. But
listen, it's never too late. I started gymnastics at 36, so you got time. You got time. Wrapping this up, we're kind of circling back and coming back into the present moment. What are 3 self-care practices that you do now to help to center and regulate yourself?
The first one I discovered when I got here was jumping in cold water. I had always, like, growing up, like swimming in the ocean in Puerto Rico, it's pretty warm. And my family on the East Coast, like we love going in lakes, but they're always kind of gross. But I've always loved the water. And then when I was in California, I didn't get out to the beach very often just because it's hard to leave campus and expensive and takes time. But a couple times I jumped in the Pacific Ocean, and people were always like, nobody goes swimming in the ocean. And I'm like, come on, it's great. And they're like, it's freezing. But nothing, it hadn't quite clicked until I came out here. And, water's frigid cold, but I'm like, oh my God, lakes, and they're clear, and water, and it's beautiful. And I just jumped right in, and I was like, this is it. This is awesome. And so I have this thing called dip a day. It doesn't happen every day, but I try every day, at least, to hop in some kind of body of water. And most of all, the ocean, that's kind of what I love. So there's a beach that's 10 minutes down the street from my house walking. So oftentimes I just hop on my skateboard and go down. Or just after work, I'll pull up my car and hop in. But yeah, North Beach, it's my beach. I go probably like 3 or 4 times a week into the Puget Sound water. It's probably around like 32 degrees. It's pretty cold, between 32 and like 40 maybe. And I do a little cold plunge, and it just totally like makes my day. And it's another one of those moments of like, I am repeatedly and constantly teaching myself the lesson of like, when you walk in the water and you're like, I don't want to do this, or I'm heading towards the beach and I'm like, it's freezing out. I was going still in January, when it was snowing outside. And so it's, snowing, it's freezing. I'm like walking up to the water. I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. What are you doing? And just like trusting, like, as soon as you get in it, you're going to love it. As soon as you get in, you'll love it. Like, just get over that initial fear, that initial sense of like, I don't want to.
Right.
And just dive. And it's like an everyday reminder of like, as soon as my head goes below the surface, I'm just like, oh yeah, oh, that's good.
Wow.
And so
it's crazy and wonderful, like all at the same time.
yeah. And so even the lakes, like I would go for my runs during the winter when I was training and then hop in the lake afterwards. And I always try and get people to join me. I'm like, come on. And one of my coworkers likes it too, but for the most part, it's just me out there like soaking in the water. And
how long do you stay in the water?
Maybe like 5 minutes ish max. So the longest has been like 10 probably.
I say before the frostbite sets in.
Exactly, yeah. But during the summers, there's a lot of bioluminescence, and in the winter there was a little bit. So I had a friend that lived in a little cove, and so we would go swimming for quite a long time because there was just like this. It was like you're swimming in outer space, and just all this bioluminescence cascading off of you, and God, it was beautiful. That's been a good one. And then just putting the makeup on, like I said, it's just my like daily moment of like quick, easy creativity. And there's lots of times in my product design classes, we would do activities like draw 100 cubes, or, you can't improve your drawing skills unless you draw every single day. So like pick an object and sketch its geometric form. And I was really, I don't, this is not it for me. Like, I want those skills, but like, I could not bring myself to do it ever. Or I would like cheat, and instead of doing like one cube every day, I would do like all of them at once. But the makeup thing is just like, that comes easy to me. And it's an everyday creative practice. And it's teaching me that like I did this look yesterday. My friend's like, wow, that took you so fast. And realizing that in the past, like, I'd be like, oh, I don't know how, and the line's not straight, and then it's this and that. And like, I don't know if I can wear it out. And it's just like an everyday, like, what color am I feeling? Orange? Okay. And then I just like go for it. So that's like given me little bits of joy and just like expression. Yeah, the running thing, that was like a new one. I hated running in high school. I don't know if you knew that about me, but because we had that.
Most teenagers don't like running. When
Yeah.
we take them out to the track, and this is pre-COVID. We haven't done it since we got back, but like, okay, physical fitness test, let's go, and run the mile, and they're like,
Yeah. It's funny too, because I remember that at Valley, I had to do the mile run, and people would like walk it as slow as they could. And I would try and run, but I'd be like 30 seconds run, 30 seconds walk, 30 seconds run, 30 seconds walk. Yeah. And then my second high school in Illinois, that was everybody there ran religiously. And I had the slowest time. You could not walk. You weren't allowed to walk during our mile tests, which happened like every couple weeks, not just like once a semester. And I was so embarrassed. Yeah, I remember I got sent home after gym after Thanksgiving break because I did the mile and I couldn't walk afterwards. So dead. I had one of the slowest times. Our final exam in gym was a 5K. Wow. And the first year I like threw up. The second year I passed out. Not my thing at all. Swore it off completely. And then during the pandemic, I was like, okay, like had a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. I was like, okay, like exercise helps. That's what they tell you. Like, let's go for a run. And I just like, I couldn't. And then I went on the farm. My cousin, who's super into athletics, was like, let's go for a run. And I think it was because I also started to get into meditation as a way of helping with sleep. Because that was the other thing I was working on, was like learning how to fall asleep properly.
Right.
Running, it started to all kind of click for whatever reason. Like I was doing a little bit better mental health wise. So I was actually able to like enjoy part of it. I was doing this meditation. So I was realizing the connection between like breathing while running and breathing just in general, like being in touch with the breath and how important that is to running. And I was also with somebody who was like, we're going today, not like no questions asked, like we're going, like it's running time. And I was like, my eager sense of just like, okay, we're doing the activity. I can't just not do the activity that we're all doing. We're like, okay, we're going. He just like got me running every day. And sooner rather than later, I was like, oh, whoa, this is actually really helpful, and started learning that, like that, once again, that lesson of like, you don't want to do it, just go do it. Like you'll feel better. that's translated to just other parts of my life. And also just the excitement of like, whoa, 2 months ago, I would not be able to run a mile and now I can run 2. Or like wouldn't be able to run half a mile, now I can. I oftentimes would just excel at a skill when I picked it up. And then as soon as it got hard, I would like just let it go because I just pick up the next one. So, I played 6 instruments. I played 8 different sports, like as soon as the instrument became hard, I would just quit it and moved on to the next one. And all of a sudden I was like a star at, this next instrument that I'd never played before. And so this was a good lesson in like, you can suck at something and you could keep going and you will get better, just breathing into that. So
100%.
Yeah.
That's true.
I haven't gone running in a month though since the half marathon, so I should probably get back
Well,
into it, but-
recovery. Oh my God, I could probably sit and talk with you for like, hours. There's so much.
There's
that
so much.
I'm so
And
like,
it's been so nice just to like reflect on all these things too.
yeah, it's a great exercise. I enjoy it because I like get to connect with people that I haven't seen in a long time, but I really remember like loving, kind of being in my presence, in my circle while they were there. And, then like you grow up and you go away and I'm like, all right, well, there's other people now that I have to, pay attention to, but to like sit really intentionally and specifically dig in a little bit and find out not just about, who they are now, but like where they came from and how they got there and how, coming through my little space, was like a part of that. It's just really exciting for me to share that with you guys. So thank you.
And yeah, you definitely were a big part of my journey through all of this too. And when I reached out to you, and it just there's those little like lessons that I still think about and carry from your class. And you were such a presence. Yeah. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Miss Sofia Poe, Sofia Carrillo, Sofia Poe. And join us next week for our next installment of Change for the Better, the Power of Arts in Education.